Donald Trump's harsh rhetoric and Xi Jinping's statements. Stock market declines lasting nearly 3 months. Billions of dollars lost by billionaires. Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, I'll break down what's really been happening in the American and global stock markets lately, why things are crashing, and what we should be doing next. Before we dive in, here's a quick but important tip. When you're watching, feel free to hit pause at key points and take some notes. Trust me, it'll help. All right, if you're ready, let's get into what's behind these market drops. Let's start where we should. The NASDAQ 100 index, which had hit its all-time high on February 19th, has been on a steady decline all the way to today, April 9th, when this video is being recorded. But this isn't your typical crash. It's not caused by a pandemic or a production issue like we've seen before. This time, it's all about politics and global trade wars. So, let's rewind and look at how this all started. Back in March 2024, the U.S. placed export restrictions on some Chinese multinational companies. This caused a major stir in China. In response, China imposed extra tariffs on American products. One of the biggest ripple effects came from the semiconductor industry. Companies like NVIDIA and AMD, heavily dependent on Chinese manufacturing, saw their stocks drop sharply, not because of production problems, but because of uncertainty and fear. You can see their drop rates on the screen now. A month later, things took a more political turn. Donald Trump, who was still a presidential candidate at the time, announced he'd start a trade war with China if elected. His claim that he'd weaken economic ties with China made headlines. Shortly after, China launched military drills around Taiwan, where companies like MSI are headquartered. That spooked investors, who fled to safer assets like gold and bonds. I'm sure some of you know people who did the same, fearing war and shifting into safe havens. Top of that, tech giants like Apple and Microsoft released earnings reports that came in below expectations. That added fuel to the fire, triggering market losses of around 5 to 6%. These details matter. Ignoring them could cost us. So far, we've talked about the events before Trump took office. Now let's get into the turning point. What happened after he became president? Or, as we say in Turkish, that's when the cow's tail broke off. February 2025. At first, everything felt calm, like the silence before a storm. Toward the end of January, both the NASDAQ 100 and Bitcoin hit record highs. NASDAQ broke 21,000. Bitcoin passed $100,000. For investors, this felt like paradise. But here's where rookie investors made their biggest mistake. They jumped in at the top of the market. Let me give you a simple example. Someone who bought Microsoft stock at around $445 in late January probably made one of the worst moves of their investing career. Why? Because right after that, the NASDAQ 100 started dropping, and Microsoft followed. Of course, that decline will stop eventually and turn into an upward trend. But by then, many amateur investors will have panicked, sold at a loss, and walked away from the market completely. Now compare that with a seasoned investor buying Microsoft at $355. He'll be making serious gains when it climbs back up. The key lesson here? Never buy high and never sell low. I'll go deeper into that later in the video, with examples and golden rules. You can skip to those parts using the timeline, but honestly, I'd recommend watching the whole thing. February 2025. Now things really heat up. After the heavenly vibes of January, February felt like hell for investors. On February 2nd, President Trump stepped back into the spotlight. Remember, before the 2024 elections, he'd boosted the markets. But after February, he flipped the script. He announced new tariffs, 25%, then 10% more on imports from Canada, China, and Mexico. Naturally, leaders from those countries hit back, releasing harsh statements, launching boycotts, even mocking Trump with skits. One Canadian cafe went as far as renaming the Americano to the Canadiano. Anyway, the markets didn't take it well. Many investors, maybe even you, pulled their money out of stocks and rushed into gold and bonds, fearing a new round of trade wars. This massive shift caused huge sell-offs and wild volatility. And listen, if you lost money during that time, don't beat yourself up. Almost everyone did, except one man, Warren Buffett. That old stock market wizard had already moved most of his money into cash. He basically kicked back with a cocktail and watched the chaos unfold. March 2025. In March, the tables turned. This time, it was China, Mexico, and Canada slapping new tariffs on U.S. agricultural products. Those moves triggered more panic. Big-time investors, the barons, started selling off shares, worried about slowing global trade and shrinking profits. The Dow dropped 800 points. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ both lost around 2%. Meanwhile, a tense meeting between Ukraine's President Zelensky and Trump at the White House stirred even more uncertainty in the markets. April 2025, the breakdown. This is where everything truly unraveled. On April 2nd, exactly 1 month after his first tariff announcement, Trump declared Liberation Day. He introduced a 54% tariff, specifically targeting Chinese goods. And like clockwork, investor confidence took another hit. The S&P 500 dropped 4.88%. NASDAQ down 5.97%. Dow Jones down 3.98%. Feeling dizzy yet? Me too. If you've made it this far into the video, props to you. You've got nerves of steel, but it didn't end there. China clapped back with a 34% tariff on U.S. companies. The stock market's absolutely tanked. Dow, minus 2,200 points, S&P 500, minus 6% NASDAQ, minus 5.8%. Just when you thought it couldn't get worse, on April 8th, former Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers warned that Trump's tariff war could push the U.S. into a recession and cost 2 million jobs. That turned the market's blood red. Billionaires lost billions. You're probably seeing the list of losses on screen right now. Except for one name, yep, Warren Buffett. Final thoughts and lessons learned. Let's wrap this up. The key takeaway from April: sudden political decisions and economic shocks wrecked the stock market and left investors feeling like they'd been scammed. Take a look at the chart on screen now. It shows how much each billionaire gained or lost during the crash. And who's standing tall in the middle of that list? Warren Buffett. While everyone else was laughing at him for selling his stocks back in December 2024, he was already sitting on a mountain of cash. Now those same people are eating their words. So how did he pull it off? Simple. Sell when markets are high and buy when they're low. When Buffett sold his shares, the NASDAQ was at record highs. That's what made him special. So, what should we do now?